right? In the exact same fashion, you can directly go and create one, storage entity, like how we created one directory in the last part. Like I said, yeah, something like /my_data. And you simply mounted it to some specific device, like let's say /dev and xvdf, correct? Similarly, in the last class also, you created something like a directory, just like EFS. You mounted it to some specific ID that was given. It was given something like fs-.aws.amazon.com. Like that, you mounted it here. Now, when it comes to S3, right, it's quite different. So you don't need any kind of mounting instructions or so. You directly go and create one specific entity inside S3. We call them as buckets. So you'll create buckets and you start hosting the data inside them. So here you just use two specific commands. One is going and mounting the file system. And if you don't want, you can unmount it. Whereas in S3, it's quite different. So S3, when I'm talking about, right, so it is made up of two things, guys. So S3 has buckets and objects. That's how the structure is designed with respect to storage entity when it comes to S3. Now here, buckets are like kind of individual entities which holds files for you. Like a folder, you can imagine, like in a typical Google Drive, you will have a folder. In those folder, you place your files, right? Exactly same thing. So here you will have buckets. This is just a logical entity. Like how we got regions, under that we got availability zones. Same way, you got buckets. These buckets are region specific. So any bucket you create, right? While creating, it will ask you in which region you want to place it. Once you select this specific region, now this bucket is just a logical entity, meaning what, you'll have some name for this bucket. Using that, you can access it. Inside those buckets, you're going to have objects. And these objects are nothing but just your files. Right? You see, right now, if I just go into my AWS account here, if I start looking for S3, it says scalable storage in the cloud. Why it is scalable, I'll explain you. Later, we have some particular concepts. So I have some buckets which were already created, but for just time being, I'll explain you. You see, each one of these buckets is. And you see, each one of them is placed in some specific region. Now, if I go into a specific bucket, I'm seeing files. So these are basically called as objects. So a bucket holds the objects, which are basically files for you. Now, these are what, unlike your EBS or EFS, these are completely internet-based storage entities. Meaning, you see right now, I'll say create a bucket. Now, while creating bucket, you need to take few things into consideration. So the name should be unique, guys. Meaning, if someone already takes this specific name, right, you can't use that name. And it can't take any spaces or uppercase letters. So if I say something like a simple name as Ravi, and I have selected some specific region based upon your use case. So I'll just select North Virginia. And if I try to create this bucket, so it says that kind of name is already taken off. Now, if not, I'll just choose something else. Now I have given some random number and some specific name. And now I selected this specific region. Now we'll discuss about access settings and all those later, but let's try to create one first. This time you see it got succeeded, and we can see a bucket with the name we have given. Right? Okay. Now this particular bucket, yes, it contains as of now no objects. Now simple here, these particular objects are nothing but your files. You can go ahead and start updating your files in this particular bucket. Now things to be aware. So here, when you want to store objects, right, it is unlimited in size, meaning you can keep as many files as you want, like your typical Google Drive, I can say. And one more thing, you can have a file up to 5 terabytes in size. Each file can be up to 5 terabytes. And like that, technically speaking, AWS says it is unlimited storage. You just keep on dumping your files there. It just takes those files, right? And also it is scalable, meaning what? You add the data, it expands, you delete the data, it shrinks. So on the fly, you need to pay. So you're using only 10 GB, you pay for only 10 GB. Got the point, right? Now I'll start uploading this data. Okay, let's say if I have some specific file, I'll try to upload the files. I have some specific image here. I'm just going and uploading this image. Isn't it almost like Google Drive? Same, like you just go ahead, go into your directory, select the file and start doing the uploads. Now it says your file is uploaded into your S3 bucket. There you go. Now you got your objects. So like this, you can go and keep as many things as you want. Okay. Now the thing here is, how am I going to access them? See here, I was logged in as my user and I'm start accessing them, correct? Now in case you are working with respect to S3, by default, everything is secured in S3. Meaning from outside, you'll never get access to any of these entities. Let me show you. So right now I logged in, so I'm not going to use that one. So you see guys, that's my bucket name. My bucket dash some 8900 and that URL I have given. So by default, your buckets are private in nature, and also the object that you uploaded. Even that is private. Right? So by default, out of the box, S3 is completely secured. There is no way anyone can access your data unless the owner, like you logged in and you did the work, right? You can access them, no problem. But anyone from outside cannot access them. Let me show you an example. You see, by default, this is how it looks. So these things are not public. But let's say if I show you things which are public, you see few of them are public here. Let's say if I have an image, okay, there is something like certificate.png. Now you see, I'm just taking this URL. Now you see I can access that particular image. Reason because it was kept public. So now, yes, you have the control. So based upon your criteria, whether you want to allow someone to access your data or not, it is completely available for you to do inside your S3 patch. So this is some other bucket which was having the public settings open. But whereas out of the box by default, you're not going to get that. Right? Now if you see, right? Yes. Now in this particular scenario, you see right now, I want to grant access. Let's imagine right now, I want to grant access to the outside world. In that particular scenario, how you need to start managing it. So in in EBS and EFS, it was like what? System attachable part, meaning what? You had security group to go with the security part. And as well as, like I said, only people with login access can get into the server and attach the things. But in here, how am I going to do that? Here things are quite different. You see here we have something called like permissions. So whenever you want to grant access to this data to the outside world, like you share in Google Drive, right? The same concept. In that particular scenario, you head out to this permissions tab. So by default, you see, there is a setting called as block all the public access. Right? And apart from this, there is also something called like bucket policy, we'll see later. And yeah, whom you want to grant the access. Right. Now, in this particular scenario, I'll try to edit. So for public, I want to grant them list and read access. And I'll try to save these changes, and it does not allow me to do it. So in S3, how the settings are defined is, even to modify the permissions also you need set, permissions. Got the point, right? So actually this is a setting which will help you give public access, but by default this is also disabled. So the only thing that you need to do is, you get back to your permissions. First you need to turn this off. Though you turn this off, right guys, nothing's going to happen. So if you go ahead and check, still no access. Even if I refresh the page, right, I'm not getting any particular content there, right? Now that is just the permission setting. Once you go with this part, now you need to go and add the access controls. Now we saved these settings. Now if I go back and if I refresh, now you see, that's the file we uploaded. Meaning on bucket level, you got the access. Getting the point is, so earlier we didn't see this part, like what this is the file name, screenshot and all that, which was not available, but now we can access it. And here permissions are granular. Object has permissions, buckets also have permissions. So now you just enable the access on bucket level. If I try to access anything in this bucket, still no access. Getting the point is, so you need to control the access on bucket level and as well as on the object level. Now what I'll do is, I want to set the access to the object. So I want to see that particular screenshot which I uploaded. Now in that particular scenario, you need to go back to your object and you also need to grant the access to object as well. So select your object, actions, make public. Now it has been given access. Now if I go ahead and if I check the part, now you see we got that particular thing. So that was a screenshot which was there in my local machine, which we uploaded to S3. Now from this particular S3, I'm able to access this particular bucket base. Right? I hope you got the points, everyone. Right? Now you see this is like quite different from what we did with respect to EBS and EFS. So S3, it's simply an internet-based storage. So whenever you want to go ahead and start, working with respect to this internet-based storage, you just upload the data and make sure you give the proper permissions. But you might say, if I have 1,000 files, then it wouldn't make sense going and giving each and every individual object access, correct? We'll see later how you can fix those kind of things. There are, additional level of permissions that you can actually use when it comes to the S3 part, right? Okay. Now you got to know how to update the data into S3, how you can access it from your account, and if anyone wants to access it from outside also, it's possible, right? Okay. Now coming to this particular S3 part, right? Here it has a concept called as storage classes. You remember in EBS and also in EFS, I said there are types: provisioned IOPS, general purpose, magnetic, right? So at the end of the day, what it's defining the performance and the price. It's the ratio between performance and price. You go with provisioned IOPS, the price gets increased. You go with general purpose, the price gets decreased. Exactly same way. In S3 also you got the same concept. But it does not depend upon the performance. It depends upon a factor called as availability. So by default, what happens, when you upload a data, you remember in our EBS and EFS, it was asking zones. EBS, you launch one particular, EBS drive. It is specific to zone, correct? It will not spread across zones. EFS, you got an option. You want it to be in a specific zone or you want it to be on the entire region. The same concept is also available with respect to S3. So in S3, out of the box, data is automatically synchronized across multiple zones. So right now I updated this data, right? We don't know, but what it is getting synchronized across multiple data centers behind the scenes. On what basis means based upon this lost column. There is a concept called as storage classes, right? So these storage classes will let you know what should be the availability for your files. Just a second. Right. Okay. I was talking about the storage classes, right? Yes. So here, this storage class determines what should be the availability. So AWS has given a big documentation. Yes, you can just check that. So we got a concept called storage classes. Like you can do the comparison with instance types or volume types. So you have been given different storage classes for different purposes. This is how they go, guys, right? So you got a big documentation. Later you can check. It has like design, durability, availability, like all this. So actually these are classified into so you got something called like S3 standard. And then you got S3 standard infrequent access. S3 intelligent. S3 one zone. infrequent access. S3 Glacier. These are all the storage classes which were given for. Now each of them, yes, there is a price variation obviously. So now coming to S3 standard, guys, that's the default one. So whenever you go ahead and start working with this S3 standard, right? So there's a default storage. Right? You can see here only. That's your standard class. So any object you upload by default, it goes into the standard class. Now, what are the features for this standard class? It has the highest availability. So its availability is 99.99%. So you can check that from this particular documentation. So it has 99.99% availability over a given year. And coming to durability, guys, it's highest, 99.119. So it is like the maximum durability you can get for your objects. Meaning here the thing is, durability refers to how robust your data will be. Meaning, let's say you kept your data within this particular S3 part. So how long it is going to last without getting corrupted. So they are saying the chance of data getting corrupted once it is inside AWS is like 0.00001%. So they are saying it's going to be durable for this part. As the reason why, because it is stored across multiple availability zones. Even one of them is lost, still I can get the access from other place, right? And also, like I said, it is giving you availability, meaning whenever the client tries to access the data, right, you are going to have 99.99% over a given period of 1 year, meaning the chance of losing the data is around 3 minutes throughout the year. That's where their official SLS is, right? So that's the reason why, as you got the maximum availability, so that's the reason why it is the costliest. Right? Yes. So this is how S3 standard class works. But it's not mandatory that every time you might need the best availability in order to go ahead and start working with your data. If you have some old data, you might not be using it on frequent basis. So what you don't want to pay the high charge, you want to reduce the cost. That's when you can go ahead and start working with something called standard infrequent access. So in standard infrequent access, name itself is saying, if you are not accessing data on regular basis, you can go ahead and store the data within this standard infrequent access, which will reduce availability. Durability is same across all the classes. So once you have the data, it is going to be durable. It will be available across all these particular places, right? So there is no question for durability part. Availability and cost is the main factor. So as I'm going with standard infrequent access, you see, it says the availability is now reduced to 99.9%, but it says durability is always same. And also it is giving multiple zones. So the data is going to be stored across multiple availability zones. So here coming to the part, so your availability is what getting reduced. And as that's the availability for you right now. Now coming to the cost, it is 20% cheaper than your standard. right? So as you are going with less availability part, right? So your cost is also going to be reduced. So where can we check these options? So right now mine is standard. I might want to change it. This is your standard class. Go to actions, edit storage class. Now you see guys, it's directly giving you also now in a nice way, frequently accessed data. You see long lived but infrequently accessed data. And you see almost everything is getting stored in more than 3 availability zones, except for this class. I'll discuss that. One zone infrequent access is the only one that is different, right? Now, if we go ahead and start, selecting this part. Now, if you go ahead and save it, then your class will be changed from standard to standard infrequent access, right? You can manually change it, but also we have techniques which can automatically do it for you. We'll see like how we can be done, right? Okay. Now, similarly, you have one more particular class called as intelligent. Now, this is little bit tricky thing is what happens is you go ahead and keep your data in S3 intelligent. It does the analysis for you. It will see for the last 30 days, the data is getting accessed or not. If the data is no longer accessed for 30 days, meaning what? No one is using that file. So it will automatically move the data to standard infrequent access, reducing the cost. No, it is accessing. So let's say there is some kind of regular access patterns happening on that file, then it moves it into standard. So that you will not get any kind of imposing restrictions on the availability part. It is always available, but obviously the cost is also going to be on the higher end. So if you don't want to manually do it, you can select this S3 intelligent tiering, which will automatically move the data or transition the data from standard to standard infrequent class. But here is the catch. You need to only do the payment for storage here, for standard and standard infrequent. Whereas in intelligent, along with the storage, you also need to pay for this kind of analytics. So monthly charge will be applicable once you go ahead and start working with respect to intelligent tiering. Clear is? But whereas in this, you only pay for storage. But here, along with that storage, you also need to pay for the analytics, like whatever this is going and doing this tracking and all this part, right? So we need to pay for those, right? That's what S3 intelligent is. So based upon which class it is, availability is always same. But here the point you need to remember is pay for storage plus analytics. Right? Yes. And then you got one zone infrequent access. Name itself is saying is the data will be stored only in one availability zone. Right? Only this is the class that just keeps the data in one zone. And yes, obviously the price is very less. And as it is keeping data only in one specific zone, you see the availability is given for 99.5%. So it's just getting reduced. So this one, it will be simply 99.5%. That's the availability, right? And durability part is same. And now just remember, you only keep non-critical data in one zone. So anything that does not have any kind of impact on your application when it is done, then you go ahead and start working with respect to one zone infrequent access, right? Yes. And like I said, yes, it is going to be much more cheaper than it is almost like 20% less than your standard infrequent itself, as you're getting less availability, right? Okay. Now, till this point, all these are active data. meaning at any given point of time, you can go and access them. Then there are two more storage classes, which are basically archives, meaning they are not active data. How we can keep it, like your zip files. So you have your data, but they're in zip format. If you extract them, you can use it, right? Same concept, right? Yeah, let's continue. Okay. Now, like I said, yes. So one zone is going to give you only limited availability. And like I said, if you are looking for what do you say, archived storage. So you know, right? Archive means what? No longer active data. We just want it to be saved in case if you want to go ahead and check some particular records. Now, in that particular scenario, this Glacier and Deep Archive, right? So we have given me two different classes to go ahead and store the data. So that's the reason why when you go ahead and store the data in what do you say, Glacier, it says what do you say, you got the durability, but there is no availability. Reason because it's not active, guys. It's never what do you say, when you go and directly try to access it, it will never work. So first you need to retrieve the data, then only you can access it. So that's the reason why for availability part, there is nothing. So you can say availability is not there. So you can check here also. When you say edit storage class, you see, guys, it says if you keep the data in what do you say, this Glacier, it says long-term data archiving with retrieval time ranging from minutes to hours. So based upon how the data has been stored, how you want to retrieve it. Do you want to retrieve within minutes or hours? On that basis, prices change. For retrieval also, you get the price. Getting the point, right? Why? Because this is not active data. So in that particular scenario, we need to go ahead and start working with any old data you have, archived data with respect to Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive. The difference between both is Glacier Deep Archive might take much more time to retrieve the data. Imagine you got a huge records, like what is a hospital records, which are like almost 10 years old. So you might not access them on regular basis, but you just want to have a backup of some patient records. In that particular scenario, these solutions can be implemented. Like this. Now, there is one more thing that you need to see. There is some minimum duration available here. Meaning, if you keep the data in Glacier, it will be there for at least 90 days. Meaning what? Based upon this particular storage class, we are going to get the minimal charge. Right? Yes. Okay, right. Now, these are all the storage classes, guys. Now, yes, like I said, you can change the storage class at any given point of time. But what, imagine this is only one single file. But let's say you have hundreds of files. Now you can't go and start selecting each one of them and going with the part, right? But you might say like what, okay, whatever the data which is there in my S3 bucket, I know this particular data should be accessed frequently. This should not be accessed frequently. Or maybe in the future, I want to archive it after a specific time interval. Now you have been given some automation rules. There is something called like lifecycle policies. So what you can do with S3 lifecycle policies is the storage class, as I said, right? You can transit the data from one storage class to another storage class based upon certain time intervals. You see, whenever you created that particular data, you know that what this data will be definitely accessed for the next 6 months or the next 3 months at any cost. At that point of time, what you might want to say, I want to keep the data for the next 3 months in the standard class. First 3 months. Then after this specific 3 months, I know that I'm not going to access the data that frequently. So I want to move the data after 3 months. I want to move it to standard infrequent class. Right? Okay. From 3 months, like what? From 90th day onwards, maybe for the next 30 days, or let's say next 90 days till 180. I want to keep it in my standard infrequent class. Meaning what? I know till 6 months, the data is going to be infrequently accessed. Thereafter, after 6 months, I'm not even sure that I'm going to access the data or not, but I want to have a backup of it. So in case if someone asks, I want to retrieve it. Now in that particular scenario, I'll say from this particular 180 onwards, maybe my data retention policy is for 1 year. So I'll say till next 1 year, I want that particular data to be available in the archive. Maybe after 1 year, yes, I'm done with this. You can directly go ahead and delete this thing. You can go ahead and write rules like this. So there is a concept called as life cycle policy. So what you can do with this life cycle policies, you can define. So how the transition should basically happen, right? Okay. Now here, you see right now we have this particular data here, right? Now what I might want to go ahead and write some transition rules. Like I just said, like what? I want the data to be transferred from one specific class to another specific class based upon some time interval. You go to this properties. Sorry, management. You see life cycle rules. You can start using life cycle rules to define what actions you want to take on S3 during its lifetime, such as transitioning the object to another storage class, or you want to archive them, or you want to directly go and delete them after a specific time interval. Right now, I can go ahead and start writing this rule. I'll say this is my rule 1 retention. Now it is asking, do you want to apply some specific filters? Meaning you got lots of data, right? Maybe only text files, only PNG files, only MP4 files. You can write filters like what? Or if let's say all those data is there in some specific folder. Let's say the folder name is like what? My files. Or let's say all your PDF files. You can go with this. Nope. You can apply for entire bucket. So like whatever the data which is there in this particular bucket, I want this rule to be applicable to all of this. Now it says, there is something called like previous version and current version, which is basically a concept called versioning. We'll discuss that tomorrow, like what is versioning and how we use it. But currently we don't have any, versions. As of now, only current version. Move the current version and also expire the current version. Now I said by default, our data is there in S3 standard. Now you can start moving it to S3 standard when, if I say something like 5. It says, if you want to use these transitioning rules, at least 30 days, your data will be there in the standard. Then only it can be moved into standard infrequent. Got the point is? Now let's say if I give something like, according to our example, 90 days after the object creation, the data will get moved into standard infrequent. Our example, first 3 months, we want it to be there in the standard. Thereafter, I want to move it into standard infrequent access. Now, after 90 days of object creation, data will be coming into standard infrequent. Thereafter, I want my data to be moved into Glacier. After how many days? So 90 to 180 will be in the Glacier, right? Yes. Thereafter, I'll say expire the current version. After 365 days. Now it shows what's happening. Day 0, your objects get uploaded. Till 90 days, they are going to be there in the standard. After 90 onwards, it's going to move into standard infrequent till what do you say, like 6 months, right? So till your 180 days, it will be there in that particular standard infrequent, and thereafter it starts moving into Glacier. And from there till 1 year, it will be available. Then after 1 year, your data will be completely exhausted. So like this, I mean, like these are generally called as data retention policy. So your company will have some rules stating that we are going to have the data only for this specific time intervals. So in that scenario, you can go ahead and opt for this part. Right? Yes. Okay. Now, if I say create rule, then obviously all these particular rules will be applied to my bucket there. Right? Now, I no longer need to manually go and each and every time start selecting again, say actions, change this bucket. What do you say? Like storage class. This is all optional now. So now implicitly out of the box rules are written and they will follow these particular rules. Right? And now you see, I think you got the difference. Now, the way we work with EBS and EFS is quite different with S3. Why? Because yes, it has its own use cases. And you see, we didn't even use any kind of instance till now. We are just going and what do you say, uploading the data and is directly accessible. But if you want to start using them within the servers and applications, there's a different technique. We'll see that particular techniques later in the next classes, like how this data will be shared with SDKs, APIs. You can't directly go ahead and directly use some mounting techniques to work with this. All right. So I hope now you got the point here. So like I said, S3 is completely internet-based storage. The way you access and work is quite different from your EBS and EFS. But yes, this data can also be used within our servers, applications, and all that. But the way you work with that approach is quite different what we learned from our previous techniques, right? So for this, again, there are some other services we need to learn in order to access this data, right? And there are other techniques still. So there is something called like versioning, web hosting, replication. So these are all characteristics of your S3. So once we learn these characteristics, then we'll try to see how we can access all this particular data within our servers or applications, like how we did for our EBS and EFS parts, right? Okay, let me see if we have any questions here. S3 types are we? Yes, Santosh, I already discussed that as the first point. Like I said, while creating the bucket itself, any bucket you create, it is going to be region specific. Yes. S3 is serverless storage. It's not serverless actually, it is infrastructure part. There is no concept of server here. So if you don't have server, it does not mean it's serverless, it's a different concept. Serverless also has servers, but you don't see them, that's it. Right? See, even EBS is also serverless, guys. EFS is also serverless. Those are just storage technologies. That does not have anything to do with the compute. When you hear the word called compute, then servers come into the picture. Right? Yes. Okay. Right. I just unmuted, guys. Yes. If you have any questions on what we discussed, you can go ahead. Yes.
Ravi, is it like a backup which we are using, like TSM, like Veeam backup?
No, see, you can store the backups, but this is not only for backups.
Because versioning concept is
That's what I said, right? So there are like lots of use cases. You can use it for backup. You can use it for your log analysis. You can use it for big data analytics. You can go it for your application static assets, various use cases. But yes, backup can also be stored with respect to S3. I said, if you remember when we created snapshots, I said they implicitly get updated in S3.
Okay. In this S3, you said it's a replication concept also there. It is like a Sonovi DRM suite which we are using.
I'm not sure like what the technology is, but basically it replicates the data wherever you want. I said we got different regions, right?
Okay.
So for disaster recovery, if one of your data is not available in region, you can get the data from other region and you can start working from there. That's what the replication is.
Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Sir, you said we can do the only static data can be loaded in this.
Correct. Yes. So if you have any database records, right, you can't keep them in your S3.
Okay, so we can only host a static website in S3.
Yes, only static assets like any HTML sites you got there, right? So those will be hosted. Like if you have any Java runtime, Python runtime, right? So those things cannot be hosted with respect to S3. Okay. So at that point of time, again, we need to rely on EBS, like EC2 servers.
Okay, got it.
Ravi, so these buckets and objects will be specific to only one region you mentioned, right?
Correct, yes.
Can this be shared across the regions?
Yes, that's what the replication concept is, Marita.
Okay.
We'll see that. So you can enable like how we saw the option of copy snapshot, right? You got the same option. You can say copy this bucket to some other specific location.
Okay. And the way we access it from the EC2 is different.
Correct, yes. So we need to use some tools actually. Out of the box, you can't directly go and access this. Why? Because EC2 endpoints are different and your S3 endpoints are different. So they're completely two different APIs.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, we'll see the technique, like what are the tools we need to install. So there are two ways. Or directly, do you want the data to be accessible, or you want to run it from the application? Based upon the technique, again, you got choices to make.
Okay.
Right?
So Ravi,
yeah, go ahead, Shyam.
For this S3 service, this free tier is eligible for this?
Yes, only 5 GB.
Okay.
Yes, you can use up to 5 GB for your S3 patch in the free tier.
Okay.
Right. They said why use someone 16 terabytes of maybe Shaker, like if they have any kind of big data workloads, right? So we need like lots of data. So imagine that you are running a large scale database, right? So at that point of time, they might need a high storage, and even it is about to be increased. So as of now, it is 16 TB, but in the future, like most probably this year, they said like it will go up to 50 TB. Right? Vishwanath, how to list as 3 buckets? We have a separate technique for that, Vishwanath. We'll see some other tool called AWS CLI. So at that point of time, you can go ahead and list your buckets and see anything that you want from your server itself.
సార్ ఇప్పుడు ఈ 1 జోన్ 1 ఇయర్ లో మనం డేటా పెడితే ఇన్ కేస్ అది మనకు ఒక అవైలబిలిటీ జోన్ కి అసలు అవైలబుల్ అది ఒకవేళ అవైలబిలిటీ జోన్ ఒకవేళ క్రాష్ షట్ డౌన్ క్రాష్ అయితే మన డేటా మనకి రికవర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు.
That's what that's what I was trying to say. So if you can't access that particular thing, right? So if imagine that it is down for 3 hours, you can't access your data for 3 hours. Right? Yeah. So that's the reason I said you should not store it, and you can't copy it from zone to zone. You don't have any such option inside S3. Right?
So Ravi, coming to EC2, I mean, with S3, do we have any best practice like we should allocate only this much storage of from S3 to EC2 servers, EC2?
No such thing like that.
I mean, for VMware servers, we decide a best practices like we need to give a LUN size of 4 TB or 10 TB max. More than that, we can't allocate. That does it apply here also for
No.
S3?
No, Santosh. Like I said, this is quite different, right? It's a scalable storage, unlike your VMware.
So there will not be any latency issues if you allocate more than 10 TB or 16 TB LUN to the EC2 from S3 bucket.
Yes. No problem. Why? Because just like your API calls, like I said, behind the scenes, it's all about your network.
Okay. Okay.
Ravi, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I will select 2 regions and I will go for that one zone option. Is it cheaper if you compare to the standard one?
Of course, right? Yes. There itself it says you can just check the pricing strategy. Like I showed you one site, right? You can always use that one to go and check. So anything that you want to go and see here, you just do the price comparison here itself. They'll give you like what should be the price strategy if you go for one zone.
One zone and in 2 different regions.
Oh, that's what I'm trying to say. You just need to compare here. So that is dynamic, right? So right now, if you are selecting North Virginia and you said one zone infrequent access, let's say 500 gigs. So it says $10. This is North Virginia, right? $5. And let's imagine you kept it somewhere inside, what do you say? Somewhere in Oregon. It's almost same, $5. There is not much difference, right? So it's basically $10 if you keep it inside one zone. If I just go ahead and use the same thing, in a standard storage class, it's like $11. So 11 point something. So you'll see like $1.2 or $1.3 is the cost variation.
Not much difference.
Yeah, around $1.5. Right? Yes.
So, hi Ravi, there is one more concept, and that we can move the data with some scripts that comes under the CLI. So, are you going to show us how to work on that? Like, how can we use those scripts in next classes?
Yes, Rahul, we'll be discussing that. So once we are about to go and manage the things from your EC2, right, then we will discuss IAM, and there comes the CLI and all those tools.
Okay, thank
Right? Yeah. All right. Okay. Fine. Yes. So this is what the things with respect to S3, and we have some other features. We'll see those things tomorrow. Then, sorry, not tomorrow, like on Monday.